Hello, everyone. Welcome to this free short video to give you a little basics about childbirth education. And this is going to be an integrative approach to tell you a little bit more about me. There we go. I am Kristen Rud, and I have been in the human development world for 12 years. I've been doing this for a really long time. My background is in early childhood education. So I took a bunch of college classes in early intervention and early childhood, and I was a nanny and a preschool teacher, and then I became a special education instructional assistant at the school district for a few years. Found my way into working with women and actually whole families in the yoga community, and then became a doula in 2018, started doing births mostly in hospitals. And then in 2020, I started making the switch over to out of hospital births. And I'm currently a student traditional home birth midwife. And I'm also a yoga and wellness educator, focusing on women's wellness that ripples out through families and communities. And today we're going to cover just some basics about choosing where to birth, a little bit about nourishing yourself during pregnancy, what to put in the birth bag, some signs of labor, what that might look like, how to handle early labor, some active labor techniques, and then what transition and birth positions could look like for you. We'll talk a little bit about placentas and how to prep for the postpartum period. So lots of information to cover, and we'll just cover the basics today. So starting with choosing where to birth. So you have three different options when you're choosing where to birth. And maybe you're going to birth at home. And you could do this with a licensed midwife in your area, a traditional birth attendant, or some women choose to free birth on their own without any provider support. And reasons to choose a home birth would be less interventions. Complications are less likely to happen in a home birth setting. Infections are less likely to occur. And this is scientifically proven. And also, this is going to be a place where you're the most in charge as the birthing woman, as the family. You're going to be able to make your most calls in your own home. And then the second place that you could choose to birth is a birth center. Typically, these are a middle ground between a home birth and a hospital setting, and you'll probably have a licensed midwife with you. And there are standalone birth centers. There are also birth centers that are connected to hospitals that are going to be a little bit more medical based. And these are a good option if home birth is unattainable, but you're really looking to have a physiological birth. And then the third place to birth is a hospital. This is the most common right now in our culture. And this is where interventions and pain medications are available. You usually cannot guarantee your desired birth team. So that means that usually whoever you're working with in your pregnancy, whether that's a doctor or a nurse practitioner or an OB, midwife, whoever it is, you most likely won't have them at your birth unless they happen to be on call that day. And this is the best place to be if you are considered high risk or if you feel like you really just have to have the pain meds or an intervention to feel safe. All right. So let's talk a little bit about nourishment in pregnancy. So not all prenatals are created equally. And so my philosophy is that the best thing to do is get your nutrition and your nourishment from your food. But prenatals are a great option if you're struggling with that. If you're in your first trimester and you're having a hard time keeping food down, or if you know that your nutrition is just not the best for whatever reason. And so I think that there's a couple different ways to go about picking out a prenatal. So one of the things that I hear a lot is that it's hard to digest the prenatal. So this new chapter one up here in the top left corner is a fermented option. So this is going to have be a little bit easier to consume, and this is a decent option. But even better is to get a raw prenatal. So that means that your prenatal is created from food, and it's the most nutrition dense type of prenatal you can get. And so Garden of Life, you can get it at pretty much any health food store. I think it's even available on Amazon, is a great raw whole food prenatal. And then otherwise, I think more important is nourishment in pregnancy. This is the best way to go. So a couple or just a few different basic tips here. So protein is going to positively affect the growth of your baby's brain and play a role in your increasing blood supply. You need lots of blood to grow a baby and birth a baby. And fermented foods, I think we should put a big star by this. This promotes healthy gut flora and vaginal health, and discourages colonization of GBS, which is a naturally growing bacteria that occurs in the gut and can colonize in the vagina, which can affect baby. So just a really great way to prevent colonization of GBS and have a nice healthy gut flora is to get 2 servings of fermented foods in a day. And you can eat fermented veggies, you can eat miso, kimchi, sauerkraut. These are all really good options. Iron is going to help prevent or combat anemia. And the best way to do this is local organic meats and produce. So spinach is really high in protein, iron. Leafy greens is going to be a great one if you cook up your leafy greens in some nice grass-fed butter. Eat that with some meat. Great iron-rich meal. And then herbal infusions, which I will provide a link here in the notes of how to make an herbal infusion, but these are going to provide calcium and minerals and strengthen and tonify the uterus, specifically if you do nettle and red raspberry leaf. And my favorite is a Nora infusion, which is nettle, oat straw, red raspberry leaf, and alfalfa, which is so nourishing for all women, really, but especially in pregnancy. So like I said, I'll put a link on how to do that. And then magnesium. This is really helpful. Pretty much everyone in the US is deficient in magnesium. That's not, I guess, not everyone, but it's a high statistic. And so magnesium is going to help balance blood pressure, prevent preterm labor, alleviate anxiety, insomnia, depression, fatigue. It can help with if you have like muscle spasms at night or restless legs. And the best way to absorb magnesium is topically through the skin. So you can get a magnesium gel or a lotion. 8 Sheep Organics is a great brand that has a great magnesium lotion for pregnancy. And then also you can get a magnesium topically through an Epsom salt bath. So that's a great way to nourish yourself. And then another thing that you can absorb best through the skin is vitamin D, which is great for development of baby's bones, teeth, kidneys, heart, and nervous system. And this is easy to do just by getting some nice sun exposure. If you can get in first thing in the morning, that's really great. But that natural light is going to help you get that good vitamin D. So there's some nourishment tips, just the basics. And then there's a really good book that I recommend, Real Food for Pregnancy by Lily Nichols. That's a great place to start if you're just like, how do I nourish myself best for pregnancy? And then we'll talk about basic foods to eat, you guys. So beef, salmon, bone broth, legumes, beans, sprouted seeds, nuts. Just giving you some ideas, right? Yams, beets, root vegetables, full fat dairy and raw milk, raw butter, raw grass-fed dairy is going to be a really great way to go. Avocados and nut butters, miso, kombucha, and kefir are some good ideas for some fermented foods. Pink salt or real Redmond salt is going to be a great way. And we want to salt to taste during pregnancy, guys. You need salt in your diet, despite what you may have heard in the past. And then dates are a great thing at the end of pregnancy. It's recommended to eat 6 dates a day. I think starting around like 36 weeks or so, 34 weeks maybe. And this is going to help ripen the cervix. So really great to prepare for labor. All right. And birth supplies. So, this is a great list for what to pack in your hospital bag. You really don't need to overdo it. And if you're birthing at home, this list still might help you know like what to have all prepared in one little space for your birth. So for mom, you might want a robe or a birthing dress or something like that, loose clothes, pajamas, socks, slippers, nursing bras, something easy to slip off or take off, something that you don't have to take over your head necessarily. Um, Flip flops and slippers, dark underwear, pads, and adult diapers, which, if you're birthing at a hospital or a birth center, they'll probably have those provided for you, but you'll probably want some at home too for the first few days postpartum. Some nipple cream, or I think a really great alternative are silverettes, which you can look those up on Amazon, but they're something that you can wear inside your nursing bra when you're not nursing, help keep the nipples nice and moist. And protect you from cracked nipples, which is not fun when you're breastfeeding. Your prenatal vitamins, if you're taking those, a refillable water bottle is going to be really helpful during labor. Honey sticks and healthy snacks. They're going to probably tell you not to eat during labor, but that is not necessarily the way to go. So bring yourself some healthy snacks. And if you are birthing in a hospital, maybe just don't ask, just eat when you're hungry in labor. Some travel toiletries, your hair ties, and then some things that are just going to maybe help you during birth. So your birth affirmations, if you want a speaker and a charger for that so that you can listen to your birth playlist, a phone charger, a camera, a birth plan if you have it, and then driver's license and insurance card if you're heading to the hospital. And then don't forget stuff for dad too, and baby. So onesies, diapers, wipes, blankets, socks, don't forget the car seat, and then vitamin K drops. If you are declining the vitamin K injection and going with vitamin K drops instead, you probably have to provide those yourself. And then if you're birthing at home, really you just need some Chucks pads, some hydrogen peroxide in case you get any blood anywhere. You can get it out of your carpet real nice and easy, and some towels and sheets. Call it a day. And let's talk about the body's birth plan. So we're going to go over this kind of quickly. There's a lot to cover here, and these are basics, you guys. So birth is not very predictable. It's something that's different for everybody, but we're going to cover the basic birth plan on what you might be able to expect. And so the first three stages that we're going to cover today are Braxton Hicks, early labor, and active labor. And then we'll move on to the other three after that. But so for Braxton Hicks, these you might start experiencing even before labor begins. You might experience them throughout the end of pregnancy. And these will typically go away if you become less active. So if you lie down, take a bath, drink some water, if you're dehydrated, typically Braxton Hicks will start to slow and go away. And that's how you know that it is not labor. But this is going to feel like a tightening, right? And they usually just kind of come and go. They might not be timeable, and they might last for a while sometimes. And so that is what Braxton Hicks is like. And then early labor, it might start with some Braxton Hicks type of activity. And then you'll start to experience some timeable contractions. So you might see contractions that are, 15, 20 minutes apart, 12 to 15 minutes apart. And the way that you'll start to tell that they're actually contractions and that you're in early labor is that they'll start to have a tightening and they'll have a peak and then they'll start to dissipate. And they might be shorter, right? Like maybe 30, 40 seconds. And then they'll start to go away. And depending on labor, every labor is different. You could experience this for days. It could be a couple hours, could be 12 hours. So it's really hard to put a time on early labor. But the best thing that you can do in early labor is to eat, so nourish yourself, move around a little bit, and then rest. So you kind of want to ignore this as much as possible. You don't want to be on your phone stimulating yourself, telling everybody that you're going into labor. You don't want to be running to the hospital, definitely not doing that. So you just really want to nourish yourself, have a good meal, and try to sleep through this as much as possible because you're going to need that energy later on. And then they'll start to pick up, right? There'll become a time where you can't sleep through them anymore. They're getting stronger. They might start to last a little longer, 45 seconds towards a minute, and they're starting to become a little more frequent. And we're going to hit active labor. And just like we talked about with early labor, this is different for everybody. So your timing, it's hard to put a time on it. We're just kind of moving into the birth portal at this point. And if you have a doula, this is a great time to get her involved, have her come over. And there are a lot of different ways to handle active labor. If you're going for a physiological labor, meaning you're going for no interventions, then the best way to make that happen, to make it through active labor without interventions, is to stay home as long as possible. Even if you're birthing at the hospital, stay home during this part as long as possible. And here's some ways to do that. So having a birthing ball is going to be a great technique, right? You can get on all fours, you can lean on your birthing ball, you can put the ball on your bed or in your shower and use it in a lot of different places. You can put some blankets or knee pads down on the floor and do the leaning there. So lots of different ways to use a birthing ball. And then a peanut ball, which you can see over in this picture on the right-hand side, you can use those for rest. So those are really great to lay in bed and put them in between your legs, create some space for the baby to just start moving down a little bit, work through those contractions and try to rest a little bit. And one of the best techniques is to get your oxytocin flowing, right? So oxytocin is the love hormone. This is the hormone that makes labor work. And so having an environment that is oxytocin producing is going to be the best way to encourage labor to happen and progress naturally on its own. So having your partner with you, getting some snuggles in, having the lights low, having a space that would be conducive to making a baby is going to be conducive to getting the baby out. So think oxytocin flowing environment. You can use aromatherapy and affirmations. For standing, right? Gravity is your friend. So swaying, standing supported like she's doing over here in this picture on the top right, squatting into the surges. Small spaces. So small spaces can make you feel safe, which is also going to help get that oxytocin flowing and keep labor progressing naturally. So the toilet or the bathroom is a great place to labor. And the toilet's also a place that your body is used to naturally relaxing and kind of releasing things. So laboring on the toilet is a great technique, especially if you're trying to get things done at home, move things along. Counter pressure. So as things get a little harder, the contractions are getting a little closer together. Counter pressure on your back from your doula or your partner can be a great way to just kind of work through some of the pain. Acupressure points, you can look those up. There's tons of them if you look in birth books or on Pinterest, different ways to move through labor using acupressure as pain relief or to help encourage labor to keep going. Your doula might have some rebozo techniques, which is common in Mexican and indigenous cultures. They use a nice woven scarf that's a really nice material, and you can use it on your back, and you can do what's called shaking the apples or around the belly while the mama's in all fours. Encourage baby to turn and get into the right position for labor. Hydrotherapy, so getting in water can be really helpful. Some mamas really like to labor in water, helps relieve some of the pain. I encourage you to wait on that as long as possible. On some of these later things, right, the counter pressure, the hydrotherapy, these are going to be pain relief techniques that you really want to wait until you really need them to use them, right? Wait until you're getting surges that are really close together. And then the aesthetics and the energy in the room matters, you guys. So I know I'm moving really fast, but this is part of that oxytocin inducing environment. So you want to have an environment that feels aesthetically pleasing and is energetically in alignment with who you are, right? Which is another reason that it's helpful to stay home as long as possible through active labor and just keep yourself in a safe and oxytocin producing environment that smells like you and feels like you and in your bedroom is a great place to labor. So moving really quickly here, but again, this can be 2 hours, it can be 12 hours, it can be a process, especially for first-time moms. So just kind of staying in that pattern, right? Rest, move, nourish, repeat, using these techniques to get through the process, get through the pattern of labor. And then positioning. So there's lots of different ways to position yourself, but letting gravity help, we talked about, right? In those standing and squatting positions. So increasing space in the pelvis and intensify surges by choosing upright positions. So the more that we're upright or leaning forward, that's really going to be positions that encourage gravity to help baby move down, encourage the cervix to open up. And so one of the things that is anti-gravity this is why I said encourage you to wait a little bit, is water, right? So when we get in the water, we get a little buoyant, we lose some of that gravity. So using that as a pain technique can be really helpful, but not helpful for that gravitational downward pull, right? And then spinal extension. So we need oxygen flowing through our body. We're breathing for you and baby through labor, right? So you can let more oxygen flow through the body by maintaining a straight spine, raising the arms above head to relieve pressure. So that's where that birthing ball can be really helpful. You can be all fours, forward leaning, helping with that gravity, and then raising the arms above your head to release pressure. Or you can put a scarf or a yoga swing over the doorway and hang on that. That can be really helpful for that gravity and that spinal extension, right? And then hip flexion. So this is in this picture over here on the bottom right corner, keeping your hips closer together and swinging the legs open to make space for baby to move down the canal. So this can be really helpful, especially at the end, right? When we're pushing. So our knees in and ankles out opens the bottom of the pelvis more than wide knees for pushing. We're trying to get that baby out of the pelvis, which I also have a free video on the pelvis in labor, which I'll link here too, so that you can check that out. And then forward sway. So leaning forward helps the baby shift into an optimal birthing position, and swaying allows the head to kind of dance down, right? So that gravity, spinal extension, you can see that holding onto something and swaying, or holding onto your partner and swaying, or that birthing ball and leaning forward. These are all really helpful tools during labor. And then support, have that good team and those items that you need to support you through every position, the doula, the birth ball, the rebozo, whatever you think you're going to need, just having those things available to you is going to be helpful. Okay, and then we're moving on towards transition, right? So at some point during active labor, if you are leaving home and going to a birth center or the hospital, you are going to leave. And your midwives or your OBs are going to have different protocol on when they want you to do that. But I think it's a good rule to wait until your contractions are, 3 to 4, maybe 2 to 4 minutes apart, lasting a minute long. And let that happen for about an hour or so before you go in, if it's your first baby. If it's your second or third or fourth baby, and your labors might be moving a little bit faster, then you might not follow that rule. And listen to your provider. They have advice that they want you to follow for a reason. And hopefully you trust your providers enough to trust that they have these reasonings, right? But hopefully we're in our birthing space by now, and we're hitting transition, and we're moving towards those end of labor. And so transition can look a few different ways, but there's different things that tell us you're getting closer. So some people like to use the purple line, which is like a line that can show up the butt crack, that can tell you maybe how many centimeters dilated you are, because you can see that pressure of the veins as the baby's head is moving low. We might be able to see a rhombus triangle on your low back as the baby's head is moving down and putting pressure and pushing on your low back. And your contractions are going to be real close together, right? on top of each other pretty much, lasting a minute long or longer, even coming about every minute apart. And you're starting to get that push reflex. You might starting to feel like you have to poop or pressure in your rectum area, and you might start to feel a change in your contractions. They're going to start to feel less like things are opening up and more like things are starting to bear down, right? And so this is where we're just moving through using our tools, leaning on our support team. And we're moving towards birth. And so if we're talking about an unmedicated physiologic birth, you might experience the fetal ejection reflex, which is really, really cool. And I guess I'll back up a little bit here. So you might notice after, like during transition, right? So we're talking about those contractions that are right on top of each other. And before a woman starts to push, before she starts to bear down, you might experience a pause. And this is where everyone's getting a little break, right? So the contractions might space out a little. She might even get to doze off and take a little nap between her contractions. And everyone in the birth room is kind of like, oh, what's happening? Is this the pause, right? And this is where everyone's just getting a little break. The uterus is taking a break, and mom and baby are getting a break before they do the big hard work, the push, right? And so on to that fetal ejection reflex. So in a physiologic birth where there's not medications that are kind of changing up the natural hormonal process, the body's going to help push, right? And so at the end of labor, after the cervix has fully dilated and all the muscle fibers have moved up to the top, we're going to start to experience a pushing, and the fundus is going to start pushing too, right? And mom's going to feel like an involuntary push start to happen. And this is called the fetal ejection reflex. This is the body working with you. And so makes it so during physiologic labor without medications present, you might not have to do that purple face pushing where you're pushing and squeezing and bearing down for 10 seconds at a time. But you might just be able to work with the body during those contractions using that fetal ejection reflex. And then you might feel that what people experience is called the ring of fire as the baby's head is crowning. And this is a really great time, if you can help it, to just stop pushing and let the fetal ejection reflex do its job. Let the body do the pushing. And this is hard because there's lots of pressure and it burns as the baby's head is crowning, but this is stretching your tissues. And when you stop here and you just allow that fetal ejection reflex to work, your tissues have a chance to stretch, and you have you minimize your risk of tearing those tissues down there in your perineum area. So this is a really good time as that ring of fire is happening and lots of pressure, the contraction goes away, the fetal ejection reflex stops happening for a moment, and you take a break, take the pause, let the contraction come back and start doing that work for you. Let the tissues stretch. This is a great, great tip to help with that minimized tearing, which I know a lot of moms have that question, right? And then skin to skin. So as soon as baby comes out, we really want that skin to skin happening. This is the baby's first initiation into the world. This is their rite of passage, right? And so that skin to skin is telling them everything they need to know about the world right now. It's safe, it's secure. This is your mom. This is what it smells like. The hormonal process starts happening so that your breasts can start creating that colostrum for the baby, and then the breastfeeding can start taking place. That process can start taking place, and the skin to skin is going to help make that happen, right? So baby's on your skin, we're leaving all that vernix, all that goodness that's on the baby's skin, we're rubbing it in, and we're leaving the cord alone. We're letting that cord pulse. Did you know that a third of your baby's blood is actually in the placenta at birth? And so we're letting that placenta drain all that blood into baby. You can actually feel the cord pulsing all of that blood into the baby, giving the baby their blood. That's their blood. They deserve it. And so we're leaving that cord. In hospitals, delayed cord clamping might be 1 to 5 minutes. It's really best practice to leave it until it stops pulsing, maybe even longer. At a home or birth center environment, you might be able to leave it for 45 minutes to an hour. You can even look up what's called a lotus birth. Super cool. way to honor the baby's connection and let that detachment happen naturally. So yeah, that's a really brief overview, you guys, of labor and birth. There's so much more to it. Every birth is unique and different, but that is a little brief overview. And then after that baby's there, you're enjoying that skin to skin, and you're going to start to feel contractions again. They're going to continue. That's going to help clamp down the uterus, get the placenta out first, then clamp down the uterus, stop the bleeding, let the body do its job. And the birth of the placenta, if you let it happen naturally, can take anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour. It's really great best practice to not let anybody pull or rush the process of your placenta birth, right? You're going to have those contractions. You're going to experience a release surge where the placenta releases. And then that placenta is going to move down the canal. You might get some pressure. That oxytocin of cuddling with the baby, you and your partner just soaking in this moment, is going to help those contractions happen, help birth the placenta. And if you're lying down, you can have your provider help you, or you can provide a little traction after that release, that placenta has released from the uterus. You can start to provide a little traction. Or you can have a sit or stand in an upright position and see if it just kind of allows itself to fall out. But that's the end of your birth. And after you've birthed the placenta, you get to just enjoy that baby. And there's so much more to look at there, which on that note, before we get to postpartum prep, I will share, it's not in the slides, but there's another book, Gentle Birth, Gentle Mothering by Dr. Sarah Buckley. I highly recommend this book. As you can see, I have it all tabbed. This is a book I teach from a lot. Highly recommend this book just for an overall overview of care. Everything we talked about today really is in this book. And then something that I think is important to cover here, at least quickly, is postpartum prep. And so this is something that I would look at before you are postpartum. Look into this during pregnancy. This book, the first 40 days, it covers what we call the fourth trimester, right? And these first 40 days after the baby's born, this is the fourth trimester of your pregnancy. This is still a sacred time. And so there's a lot of great tips in the first 40 days. I'll let you get into that book yourself. But some basics here. The 5-5-5 rule is after birth, right? The best practice for your healing and for baby's adjustment is to spend 5 days lying down in bed. We are in bed, lying down, let everybody serve us, just get up to go to the bathroom, really. And then 5 days sitting up in bed after that. So the next week we are, still spending most of our time in bed, or maybe moving down to the couch for the day and then just going back to bed at night, but really spending most of our time resting, just snuggling with baby, establishing a breastfeeding relationship, having your food and your teas brought to you. And then 5 days around the bed, right? So 5 days where we're still not really in much activity, but maybe getting up and showering every day and just being a little bit more active in your daily routines, brushing your hair a little bit more often, maybe just kind of getting back into real life. But this is going to really help you heal faster, right? So the more you rest at the beginning, the better your vitality is going to be further along in your postpartum time and for future pregnancies. So the best thing you can do is gather a support team, have a postpartum doula, have a postpartum meal train, have people that are going to support you and your family while you are adjusting at this time, have a lot of nourishing foods prepped. You can do freezer meals. Crock pot meals is a really great way to go. And the first 40 days has some really awesome recipe ideas in the back of it as well. Womb steaming is a really great ceremonial way further on down your postpartum line to regain all of your health. It's really good for tissue repair and for hormonal just kind of rebalancing. You can also do some other really beautiful ceremonies with a doula. Closing of the bone ceremony is a really beautiful postpartum ceremony. Getting pelvic floor support is a great idea. Going into a chiropractor for you and baby is a great idea. And then looking into what your relationship changes are going to be like. So, what is it going to be like to bring this new baby into your family? How is it going to change the dynamic between you and your partner? If you already have kids, what's it going to be like for them, for their new sibling? And just really prepping yourself for this really sacred and fragile time before you get there is going to be my best advice. So, that's a really quick synopsis of postpartum. I'd really recommend the first 40 days. And then I just want to offer some more resources. If you head to our virtual network, it is the mermaidmovement.mn.co. Mighty Network is what MN stands for. And here you can find some free articles, blogs, tons of really great resources for really women in general, women, pregnancy, fertility, hormonal health, all of those things. I have a birth support training if you're interested in becoming a birth worker or just supporting your friends and the women in your life through birth and postpartum. There's a really awesome training on there that's really just full of information, and some women's wellness classes that you can take free and paid on our network. So feel free to check that out. And if you are pregnant and you are planning an out of hospital birth and you're local to us in this Temecula area, you can go to mermaidmovement.com/birth and check out my offerings. And I also do one-on-one classes and education. So I really hope you got a lot out of this video. If you learned a lot, I am grateful for love donations. They are accepted but never expected. My Venmo is at Mermaid Movement, and I am so grateful for your energy exchange if this felt really helpful for you. So check out the show notes down at the bottom in the comments and get some more resources. And I hope you have a beautiful pregnancy, birth, and postpartum period. Have a great one.